Hi everyone, good afternoon. It's Jen East here. Welcome to today's webinar, Completing the NDIS Access Request Form for Success. Today your presenter will be Robyn Lang and I'll be facilitating, and once again my name is Jen East. So as we get started today, I just wanted to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians, past and present, on whose land we meet today. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and the relationship of Aboriginal people to country, and respect the cultural authority of the elders in each community. So a bit of an introduction to Robyn. Robyn started her work venture with MS as the Peer Support Coordinator way back in 2011. In 2014, Robyn took on the role of the NDIS advisor, where she works to help to understand the significance of the NDIS and its intricacies, the eligibility criteria, the opportunities the scheme offers to help people lead a more ordinary life, the role of the local area coordination, and how to request reviews of decisions that potential participants may require. Robyn has also developed NDIS resources, including information sheets, frequently asked questions, and webinars and workshops for clients, NDIA planners, and local area coordinators, all of which are a culmination of her ongoing learnings of the ever-expanding NDIS space. Robyn is very much committed to the concept of the NDIS and helping people get the best possible outcomes from it. So I'm going to hand you over to Robyn now. And as I said, if anybody has any questions throughout the presentation, we're happy to answer them. And we're also happy to answer them verbally if that suits everybody. So bear with me for a second. Here you go, Robyn.
Okay, I've got to show my screen, and Jen, just let me know if you can see it. All good?
Yes, we're all good, thank you.
Fantastic. Hi everyone, and thanks for joining into the webinar this afternoon. This is a new one that we haven't done before, and Jen and I would love some feedback at the end, and I think Jen will explain that to you when we get to the end of today. So it'd be really good to know what you think. So today we're going to talk about the NDIS access request form. And hopefully what will come out of today is a familiarity with the access request form, and I'll probably call it the ARF from now on because it's a bit easier to say. Hopefully you'll have an understanding of its importance in determining somebody's eligibility for funded supports, and who needs to be involved in completing the form, understanding what the NDIA is looking for on the form, and helping your health provider to understand their role in completing it. So it'd be really good if you all have a better feel for the ARF at the end of today. So let's look at the access request form. It's a really important document, and it's pretty much the only piece of information the NDIA uses to make a decision on whether somebody's eligible or not. So the information that's on that form is what they use to decide, yes, you are, or maybe at this stage, no, you're not eligible. Very important form. Obviously, if it's such an important form, it needs to be filled out correctly. And you need to have a health professional complete some parts of the form. So how do you get one? It's pretty easy. You call the NDIS on the number that you can see on your screen, and that number is 1800 800 110. And all you need to do is say, I'd like to know if I'm eligible for supports and services. Could you please send me an access request form? You could also visit one of their local offices in person if you wanted, and they will give you one, pass one over to you, and you can then go home and fill it out and send it back again. It's important to know, don't go looking on the NDIS website because it's not downloadable from their website. Each access request form has an identifier on it, and it can't be you can't use a copy, you can't download it. You actually have to either ring or go to an NDIS office to ask for one. It's an important piece of information for people living with MS. You do have 28 days from the date. So say you rang them and asked for the access request form to be sent to you. The letter will have a date on it when it comes into your letterbox, and you've got 28 days from the date of that letter coming to your letterbox with the form inside it for you to get it back to the NDIS. Now, they will grant extensions, but you would have to ring and ask for one. And I think that's really important for people living with MS, because if you're experiencing a great deal of fatigue, if you've got some mobility issues, if you can't get in to see your GP, or you want to get to your neurologist and that 28 days is not enough time, then just give them a quick call and say, look, I haven't had a chance to get it completed. Could you please give me an extension? And they will do it. The other thing I probably should just say is, if you do call the NDIS and ask for the access request form, they may ask you for some initial information about your disability before they send you the form. And I would be just a little bit careful about the type of information you provide them with at that stage. And if they are asking you some preliminary questions, I wouldn't downplay the MS symptoms that you experience. I would probably, if they're asking you those questions, maybe answer them in light of a day when you're really struggling with your MS. So maybe one of those days when it's been really hot, or you've had to do a lot of things and you're really struggling. So don't downplay it. You don't have to give them a great deal of information if they're asking questions. You can just say, look, I'd rather fill out the form and just send it back into you. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of it about filling out the access request form. So section 1 is pretty simple and it's pretty short. You need to give them your full name, your date of birth, and that's because they will only accept people who are younger than 65 years of age. If you have somebody helping you to fill out the form, you need to give the name of that guardian or the carer or the representative who's helping you to complete it. You need to give them a phone number. And some people will already have an NDIS number. If you don't know it, it doesn't matter. It's not an essential piece of information. But just a helpful hint, NDIS numbers usually begin with 430 or 431. But as I said, it's not an essential piece of information. So don't panic if you don't have an NDIS number, if you don't know it. Okay, section 2. Now this section, and these are their words, must be filled out by your treating doctor or your specialist. So generally that would be your GP or your neurologist. And in that section 2, the details of the health professional completing the form have to be put in. That treating specialist writes down your impairments, any early intervention supports that might be of benefit, details of any recent assessments. So if your GP or neurologist has completed something like an EDSS, which is the expanded disability score, then you can include that. But it's not essential. We would suggest that if you have recent assessments, and when we say recent, we mean anything less than 2 years old and preferably less than a year old, just as supporting evidence, it's always helpful to put those recent assessments with your access request form, and you can just, you just attach them. And I would not attach the original, I would only attach a copy, because documents go missing from the NDA all the time. Jen, before I move on, I'll just check in. Any questions?
Yeah, just one question, Robyn, and that is, do you have to do this process if you're transitioning from another service?
Yeah, Really good question. So if you're transitioning, you probably don't have to, and it might depend on the complexity of your level of impairment. So if somebody is receiving a lot of disability funded supports already through the old system, the state or federal system that was in prior to the NDIS, those people are transitioning across. And if you've got, you're quite complex, then probably it will just be a smooth transition in and you won't have to complete the access request form. If, however, in the past you've received like a small amount of help, so say some home help through the HACC program or another state-based program, you might have to fill out the access request form. So just a quick call to the NDIS to ask them whether or not you do need to fill out the ARF would be a really good idea, because seriously, nobody needs to do this if they don't have to. So yeah, a really good question, Jen, and I probably should have addressed it back at the beginning. Section 3 is where all the details of somebody's, and these are quite, it's not words I like to use, but it's the language of the NDIS, and it's important that we start to mirror their language. So this is where details of somebody's functional impairment are recorded. And as you can see from that slide, it says this section must be completed by a health or education professional. So that could be the GP or the neurologist who filled out section 2. Or if your GP or neurologist doesn't have a really good picture of your MS and you've seen somebody like a physio regularly, or an occupational therapist who really knows you and your MS and how it affects you on a day-to-day basis and how it affects you completing everyday tasks, then that person might be a better person to fill out section 3. But again, you can choose. It can be your GP or neurologist filling out sections 1 and 2, or you can choose just for your GP or specialist to fill out section 2 and someone else to fill out section 3, as long as they're a health professional. Section 3 has 6 areas of reporting that the NDIS wants information on, and these are called the 6 domains. And they include information about somebody's mobility, their ability to, their level of communication, social interaction, learning, self-care, and self-management. And I think it might be good here to put the access request form into some sort of context. This form is provided to anybody who wants to enter, who's asking to enter the NDIS. So it could be a parent filling out this form for a young child who's been diagnosed with a learning impairment. It could be a young man who has had a recent acquired brain injury. It could be somebody living with cerebral palsy. It could be somebody with a mental health issue. It could be somebody living with MS. It could be somebody living with motor neurone disease. The form is very generic because it has to capture information from that wide gamut of people who are living with disability. So this is why it's important when you come to this area of reporting and your health professional is reporting on these 6 domains, that they are very clear about your MS and how it affects you in these areas and on a day-to-day basis. And I'm going to go through that in a lot more detail as we run through today.
Just got a question, Robyn.
Yeah.
So I've got a question that says, I've already made the phone call to NDIS and told them about my primary disability, that's MS, but I also have a reported secondary disability. Is it appropriate for me to provide reports and details for both disabilities, given that they both have significant impacts on my daily life or day-to-day life?
Yes, so I would, and the access request form does have ability to talk about more than one disability. I would gets a bit tricky here. As long as it's a disability, not a health condition, I would add it. And I'll give you an example. I worked with somebody who is living with MS, and she had quite a significant level of functional impairment, but she had also recently been through a diagnosis of breast cancer. And she and her doctor put that information down on the access request form. And she was denied access to the NDIS initially because the NDIS, I think, looked at her diagnosis of breast cancer and the fact that she had undergone some chemotherapy and made some decisions about some of her symptoms that they thought may relate to her health condition, which was cancer, and not her disability, which was MS. So I would just be a little bit careful about that. And I think if you're at all in doubt on that question, I would be calling MS Connect, because we've got an NDIS engagement team who can help you sort through that and work out whether or not it's going to add value to put in that extra information or whether it's not. So I would think very carefully about it. And if you're not sure, as I said, give MS Connect a call and ask to speak to one of the NDIS engagement team members. Okay, so let's look at mobility and the sorts of things that that we might be talking about under this domain. So what I want you to think about under this one, and this is how you have to report, if you think your GP doesn't know how well you're doing these things, then you need to be able to talk to him or her about your mobility on a day-to-day basis. So think about how you walk around your home and your community with ease. Do you look at a set of steps and go, you know what, I can't do that? Do you think, I can't walk down to the park with my children late in the day when when my fatigue's high and it's been a hot day and I've had temperature intolerance? You might not have ever talked to your GP about stuff like that. If your GP doesn't know, they can't put that stuff into the access request form. Think about your balance issues. Have you ever had a fall because of your balance issues, or have you had near falls? Do your furniture walk around the house? Are you reluctant to go out if your balance is a bit iffy on a bad day? Think about these things. Maybe make some little notes to take to your GP to discuss so that he or she can write down some of this information in the access request form. In terms of your mobility, I mean, obviously, if somebody's using a chair or a walker or a scooter, that's very obvious. But for a lot of people, it's less obvious, and fatigue and heat intolerance or muscle weakness might affect your mobility on a fluctuating basis. And so you need to think about that. Do you ever experience tremor or spasticity or numbness? And you might not have been talking to your GP about some of this stuff. And again, make sure you put some notes down before you take this form to your GP or your neurologist so that they can write down these details. And if you do experience some weakness or some balance issues or even spasticity, having an exercise program that helps you maintain your strength and mobility, or to even build it. So, you know, we want to be aspirational about not just maintaining people's levels of mobility, but also improving them. Then that's a piece of information that the GP can also add to the access request form. So wording is really important when somebody is filling out an access request form. So I've just given you some examples here of the type of wording that they're looking for. So it would be good for your GP to say things like, the person is unable to walk upstairs or around the shopping centre due to weakness, balance issues, lower body strength, whatever it is. They're unable to prepare healthy meals due to numbness, loss of fine motor skills in their hands. Things like, you know, somebody can't change the sheets because those fitted sheets on the bed are really difficult to get it on and off. It's difficult to get them in and out of the washing machine. If you've got balance issues, it might be difficult for you to carry all that washing out to the clothesline and then put your hands above your head and peg it onto a clothesline. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have never talked to their GP about stuff like that. Maybe you struggle to complete cleaning tasks and it might take you, you know, a whole week to do the entire house because you can only do one room at a time. So think about your wording and think about the things that are difficult for you to do, because all this stuff needs to be recorded so the NDIS can make an informed decision. So let's look at communication, and I know Jen will interrupt me if there are any questions. So think about whether you have any problems with your speech or your ability to write. So if you're fatigued, do you start to slur your words? Do you feel sometimes that people are making judgments about you if you are slurring your words, that maybe, you know, you're not as intelligent, or you might have been drinking? Does any weakness in your hands, or if you've got spasms or tremor, does it make it difficult for you to write? Do you feel that you're able to express your needs adequately? Do you become easily upset? Do you sometimes have feelings of frustration because you're unable to do things, and you know it's difficult to contain that emotion? This is a big one. Do you have issues with word finding, especially when you're fatigued? You know, you've got that word in your head, but you just can't get it out. So think about that when you talk, when the GP's filling out this communication section. And are you dysarthric? So wording again is important here. So writing down things like the person has difficulty finding words, especially when they're fatigued or affected by heat intolerance, or the person has slurred or slow speech when they're fatigued, making it difficult for them to be understood. So it's things like that that need to be recorded in that access request form. And if you can help your GP, as I said, to put this sort of information down in these sorts of words, it's always much better. Let's look at social interaction. So are you able to interact with your local community? And there might be all sorts of reasons why you're not. It could be because on a bad day, even if you wanted to do whatever interests you, it might be going into your local library, it might be going to a gym, it might be going to your local church, it could be going to a craft or hobby group, whatever it is, might be going to your local park. If you're not able on occasions to do that because of your MS, then you need to be recording that. So it might be because of heat intolerance, it might be because of your mobility or balance, it could be because of continence. You might feel very, very uncomfortable about getting out and about in case you have an accident. If you're with a group of people, are you able to manage your emotions? Do you become overwhelmed in big groups? Does it become difficult to take part in a conversation if there's lots of stuff going on, and so you become a bit withdrawn? Are you having trouble making and keeping friends? So I talk to a lot of people who live with MS who say that their circle of friends has contracted a lot because a lot of people don't understand those hidden symptoms of MS, and it just becomes too difficult sometimes to keep up those relationships if people don't understand the sort of things that you experience that are quite often hidden. Or if you keep having to say to people when they ask you whether you'd like to do something, no, I can't go, or I don't feel up to it, and they don't understand why you can't, and so they stop asking you.
I've just got a comment about that it's really hard to verbalise those concerns to a health professional because it's something that you don't normally speak about. So yeah. Maybe, do you have any suggestions on the type of wording you could use around the social interaction side of things?
Let's get through the next slide about wording, and if it's not answered in that, then we might just spend a bit of time thinking about it. I think too that I've probably just launched into this without saying that this is quite confronting, and you might have to talk about some things that you probably don't talk to a lot of people about. And so it can be difficult and it can be confronting. And I think the only thing I can say about that is that we acknowledge that it can be hard. But if you are able to do it and to be really open and honest and, realistic about how your MS is affecting you, once you've been through this process, you don't have to go through it again. And the outcome might be that you're getting a lot of supports and services that you haven't had in the past that are going to change the way you live your life. So it's very easy for me to say, talk about this and talk about that. But I do acknowledge that it can be difficult and it can be really confronting for people. So let's keep going and then we'll see if we've got some wording. I'm sorry, I don't remember the wording I've got in my next slide, so I'll have to get to it to work this one out. So, and before we do, this is a really important one. Are you able to maintain your role in the family? So do you feel like, and whatever that role is, as a grandparent, as a parent, as a partner, as a sister or a brother, as a daughter or a son of elderly parents, if you feel there are things that you can no longer do or that you've had to compromise because of your MS, it's really important to think about that, because it's much better for people to have the supports and services that they need so that they can then get back to a more normal kind of role in the family, whatever that is. So I think that last one's a really important one. I think a lot of people don't often think about that, but it's really important. Let's look at the wording. Oh no, sorry. Can you maintain your connections to community? I think that's a bit like the first point, actually. I don't think I need to expand on that one. Okay, so this is the wording that that we're suggesting, but you don't have to use it, but we think it's a good idea if you can. So social isolation due to lack of, and it could be lots of things, but here we've put down things like mobility, continence issues, lack of transport, and a loss of confidence. Friendships have been difficult to maintain. People don't understand the hidden symptoms of MS, such as my cognition, fatigue, heat intolerance, or continence issues. Wording like it's difficult to maintain my role as a parent to help the children with their homework or transporting them to and from school or other activities and participating in family outings. And this last one too. So difficulty in maintaining role of a partner in terms of contributing to household tasks and I guess really importantly, maintaining a sexual relationship. So Jen, do you think that wording will have helped the person that asked that question?
Yeah, and I think it's about, relating it to the impact of the MS as well, which is important. I think that the wording you've got there kind of highlights the fact that you need to, almost like in a debate, you've got an issue, but to show some evidence of why that is.
Yeah. And we can, if I don't know who the person was that put the question in, but we can always just go into a bit more detail at the end if we've got some time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the next domain is learning. So have a think about whether your cognition has been affected by multiple sclerosis. Do you have difficulty remembering things? Do you have post-it notes all around the house? Do you have a big whiteboard? Do you use a device to remember to do things? This is a big one. Do you struggle to learn new things or skills? And new things can be something as simple as, well, it's not simple, figuring out the NDIS, and if you do get into the NDIS, then actually understanding the funding in your plan and how to activate it. And it's really important to be able to put this stuff down, because there's something that people, if you do record that you have difficulty learning new things and remembering things and your cognition is affected, you're much more likely to get something called support coordination funds in your plan. And support coordination is there for people who might struggle to understand their plan and activate it and make the most of it. And for people living with MS, especially in the first year of their plan, if they can get support coordination, we know they get better outcomes. So again, it can sometimes be difficult to think about, your cognition, but at the end of the day, if you can be really honest about it and explain to people, especially your GP, if they're not they don't know you too well about how your cognition affects you, you're more likely to get the supports and services you need. And is it affected? And this, I know this happens for a lot of people living with MS. If you're tired, or if, you know, it's been one of the, I know it's cold at the moment, but it's been one of those sticking hot summer days, and you just, you know, you've got that MS fog in your brain and you just can't sort anything out. So keep that in mind as well. Again, as every time, wording is important. So if the doctor can put down things like the person's unable to remember appointments or pay bills, they can't remember what to buy when they're shopping, or even things like reading a recipe and following it and knowing what step comes next and remembering where you're at and actually getting something done. If struggling to learn new things makes it difficult to maintain employment. Maybe even things, I haven't put it down here, but maybe things like if there's too much stuff going on around you, like the TV's on, the whole family's around, people are talking, and you're trying to focus on getting something done, and it's difficult for you to focus on one thing with all that kind of background noise happening. And if you need to have quiet so that you can think through something and get it done, then it's important to make sure that you've talked about that to your GP or your neurologist.
I've got a question, Robyn, and I think it relates to the use of the words unable to, you know, do X, Y, and Z. What happens if it's only sometimes that is a problem, and it's not all of the time? Maybe there's a perception of that from GPs that if it's only sometime, it's not a big impact.
Yeah. And I think that's the big problem for people living with MS, because it can be, you know, it is a fluctuating thing for some people. And if, you know, say somebody's having a relapse, or as I said, they're fatigued or they've had heat intolerance, then there'll be all sorts of symptoms that that person will be experiencing that on a good MS day, they don't even have to think about. But I guess the supports and services are there for people on the days when they are struggling. And that's why we always suggest that you talk about MS on a day that is difficult, as opposed to a day when, you know, actually I'm doing okay today. It's about getting supports and services for those difficult days. So it's a bit about educating your GP as well. And we have an information sheet that you can give to your GP or health professional or your specialist that helps them understand the wording around the access request form, what it is and the importance of filling it out. It's only a one-page information sheet, and if you think it would help you to give that to your doctor or health professional before they fill out the access request form, I think that's a really good idea. And the easiest way to get it is just to call MS Connect, and they can either mail you that form, or you can they can email it to you. So I take the point that a lot of people have good MS days, but you've got to be able to talk about the days when it's not so good. And the NDIS does recognise that MS is a fluctuating and progressive disease. Okay. So self-care. So things that you might want to report on here are, can you independently shower? So you might be fine getting in the shower and washing yourself and drying yourself, but you never do it unless somebody else is in the house. So you might not need a carer to come in and give you a shower, but you might always have to have another family member around just in case you do have a fall, or to help you if you're really tired afterwards and you can't get the towel on your head, or, you know, whatever it is. So it's not just about having someone shower you, it's about that kind of safety aspect. Do you have trouble dressing? Is it difficult for you to do buttons up, get bras done up, get shoelaces done up? Do you have trouble eating or caring for your own health? These are things to think about. very important one. Do you have continence issues? And if you use or need equipment, or if you need an assessment, these are all things that can be funded in an NDIS plan. So if you use continence pads or if you self-catheterize, then you need to actually have that recorded on the form as well, so that the NDIS is getting a really good picture of how you're affected by MS. A really basic one. Can you clean your own home? Can you do the gardening? Can you make beds? Can you prepare healthy meals? Can you do the laundry? You know, all those day-to-day activities. If you struggle to do them yourself, if you need help to do them, if you have to spread the load because of fatigue, then it needs to be recorded, and your GP needs to know how you're struggling. Can you look after family members who are in your care? So if you're a young mother, can you lift the kids in and out of the bath? Can you get them to and from preschool or school? Can you attend school meetings, or can you get your kids to, you know, to after school activities or just down to the park because that's what you want to do? Can you help look after elderly parents who you want to look after but you're struggling to do? So think about all the family members who you have a relationship with and who you care for. Some of the wording. A person's unable to shower independently due to muscle weakness or balance. And as I said, independently could just mean that somebody has to be in the home, or other family member prefers to be in the home and worries about you if you're showering alone. And it could be at the other end of the scale where you're needing someone to actually help you to shower and to dry off and then dress. Do you have any difficulty swallowing due to muscle weakness in your tongue or throat, making it difficult for you to eat independently? The person's unable to clean the house, do the laundry, or manage the garden because of mobility, weakness, or balance. The person's unable to care for family members such as small children or elderly parents. The person is unable to prepare healthy meals. All this information will help, and using that sort of language is really helpful. So self-management. Can you make decisions independently, and do you do so confidently? And that doesn't mean that something like Guardian's going to be put in place for you. It just means do you not feel confident making decisions? Do you put decisions off? Think about how you manage your paperwork. Do you struggle to get your bills paid on time? Do you forget to get to doctors or other important appointments? Do you struggle to manage your own finances? Have a think about all these things. And some wording here that helps is the person's had changes to their cognition which have made it difficult for them to make decisions, stay on top of bill paying or other paperwork, or manage their own finances. And that could include things like having difficulty managing and keeping to a budget. So what happens if the access request form is not filled out with the right information in it? You could be deemed ineligible for funded supports and services that you are actually entitled to. You may need to appeal or get the decision reviewed, and that takes more time and it takes more money, and it is stressful. And for a lot of people living with MS, that's the last thing they need. They don't have sometimes the time and the money, and they feel it's not worth the stress. So if we can get the access request form filled out really well, you're more likely to have a decision made by the NDIS that's well informed given the information you've given them. So I've got some handy hints about completing the access request form. Your symptoms fluctuate, so I want you to consider your ability to manage everyday tasks on a bad MS day. This is their wording about an ordinary life. So the scheme is designed to support your ability to lead an ordinary life and your ability to complete everyday tasks and activities. So if you think that your life is no longer an ordinary life and that incrementally it's changed because your MS has progressed, and that you struggle to do everyday things that everyone else takes for granted, then it's, we would consider that you should be applying for the NDIS. Many people with MS don't discuss the day-to-day tasks which they struggle with, and especially with their GP or their neurologist. So it's something you are going to have to talk about. It's really important to consider those hidden symptoms of MS and to make it clear to whoever's helping you fill out the access request form about the impact of things like fatigue, cognition, incontinence, and heat intolerance. If you've got an expanded disability status scale that's been completed, or other reports or assessments, as I said earlier in the webinar, it's a really good idea to include them when you submit your ARF. If you do have an EDSS and it's not high, I would not include it. The EDSS score is very limited. It's mostly limited just to people's level of mobility. It doesn't score you on anything like fatigue or continence or cognition. So I would only ever be putting the EDS score attached if it was quite a high one. Otherwise, it's just going to make it more difficult for them to make a good decision, because they're not, it's just not measuring all the things that people living with MS have to experience. It's a really important point. Make and keep copies of all the documents you submit. So if you submit the access request form that the doctor has filled out, make a copy of it. If you've got assessments or reports, make copies of them or keep the originals and send in the copies. And the reason for that is, I can't tell you the number of times people have submitted their access request form and attached other documentation, and when they've rung up to see how the decision is progressing, the NDIS has turned around and said, oh, we can't find those documents. And so you've either got to go back to your doctor and start all over again, which is a pain in the neck. But if you've got everything, if you've got copies of everything, then you can just resend it. So an NDIS folder with everything you ever send to the NDIS is a very good idea. So these are some common problems that we know happen when people are told that they're not eligible for funded supports through the NDIS. So if your doctor ticks no, does not need assistance on each of those 6 domains that we've just gone through, then there's no reason why the NDIS would consider that you needed supports and services to help you. If your doctor focuses on the intervention rather than the deficit that you actually experience, or if your doctor doesn't include everyday examples of your deficits, or if your doctor lists interventions that you already have. And I'm just going to go into that a bit more. So this gives you some good ideas about if the doctor says the person uses a wheelchair, well, that's fine, but that's the intervention. The deficit is that you're unable to walk more than 10 metres. If the doctor only writes that you use a wheelchair, the NDIS might think, oh, well, the person's got a wheelchair, they're fine, there's nothing we need to do for them. It's really important to talk about what's difficult for you to do, not what you use. So it's better to say, this person has balance issues rather than Joe uses a walking stick or walker. It's much better to say Joe needs supports to access areas of their home rather than saying that, oh, well, their bathroom is modified so they're independent. Well, that might not actually be true. Saying the person can't leave home to attend social events due to urgency issues is much more clear than just saying somebody has continence issues. And similarly, it would be better to say somebody is living with significant fatigue, which affects their ability to access the community, really importantly, maintain employment, learn and communicate, rather than just saying somebody gets tired and needs to rest. People with MS don't get tired. They have significant levels of fatigue, which is very different. So you can see the different wording there and what's better to say rather than what's not. So we're probably a wee bit early, Jen, about 10 or 15 minutes early. So if there are any questions that anyone has, now would be a great time just to go through them. And it could be about anything about the NDIS. It just doesn't have to be about the access request form.
I do have one question, and it's trying to figure out whether something's, you know, for the healthcare system or the NDIS, but it's about incontinence products and needing those for not urinary incontinence, but as a result of capturing blood from, say, constipation or hemorrhoids and things like that. Would that be healthcare, or is that NDIS?
It's a bit of a tricky one.
It is. It's hard to know what comes first, you know, the
yes.
constipation
what I'm
because
thinking,
of the MS, or then the hemorrhoids.
And a lot of exactly, Jen. And as a nurse, like, you know better than me that people live with a lot of bowel issues with MS. And if one of their bowel issues is constipation and then hemorrhoids, and then the need for a continence equipment, i.e. pads or something to help them to get out and about in the community, then I would say absolutely it's the NDIS, not the health system. And I think you probably would, it's not lying, it's just saying when you know that you wouldn't have to actually, I actually wouldn't say too much in the access request form. If you completed an access request form and you were deemed eligible for funded supports and services, the next step is that they then make a time to have something called a planning conversation with you. And I think then would be the time to discuss your continence needs in terms of the equipment that you need. And you might not have to go into any detail about why you're needing it. All you need to say is, I use this many pads a day or a week or a month, and then you'll get funds in your plan to pay for that continence equipment. So that's how I would get around that one. Bit tricky.
Thank you. Yeah. It's also another question. Would you include copies of your MRI to confirm that you actually have MS? And that might lead you to discuss about confirmation of diagnosis.
Yeah, it's really important to have a confirmation of diagnosis, and it would never hurt to put in a copy of your latest MRI showing the lesions that you have either in your spine and or in your brain. So I would say yes. I think that it's not absolutely necessary. If your doctor has in section 2 made the statement that you have been diagnosed with MS, that should be enough. You shouldn't have to give further proof via an MRI, but it doesn't hurt to put it in. So if you feel more comfortable putting it in, put it in. And I would, again, do it as a copy. Don't give them the original. I guess the other thing, Jen, just while we're here is, as I said before, we can help people to understand a bit more on a one-to-one basis about the access request form. And even if you got it completed by your GP and you weren't sure whether it was, going to hit the mark, you could easily ring MS Connect and say, look, I've had my access request form filled out by my GP, but I'm just not sure whether he or she has put enough information in the form. One of our engagement team would be more than happy to look at it and give you a little bit of advice about whether they think that enough information has been provided. And I think that's a much better way to go than putting it in if you're not sure and then being told that you're not eligible because there hasn't been enough information provided. So please remember that MS Connect is there and they will put you onto one of our engagement team members.
Just for me to go over some of the services that we provide at MS, just because there are people on board today who have, this is one of their first webinars. They haven't had much to do with MS before, and that they're new to the NDIS and just starting their journey with thinking about their eligibility. So it's a really good opportunity for me to just let people know that we're here as a service that can provide expert advice and information. We have a MS Connect line, which are manned from now, I think it's 8:30 till 6 now, and we also have a live chat function, so you can chat to the team at MS Connect online throughout the day. Often people are at work and don't have time to ring up, so that's often a good avenue of just getting some advice and quick access to the MS Connect staff. We also have an education team, and this webinar is one of those services that we provide through the education team. But we also provide webinars and face-to-face education on a range of topics, NDIS or managing symptoms, also dealing with mood and emotions and parenting, as the list goes on. We've got a upcoming webinar on a research update on gut health and its effect on MS symptoms, which is really exciting for our new researchers who are funded by MS Research Australia to provide us with an update on what they're up to. We also run a range of wellness events as well. So keep an eye out. If you don't get any emails from the education team, just email us at education@ms.org.au and we can provide you with access to our newsletters. We also have a peer support program, which is good for people on, whether they're starting their journey, having been diagnosed with MS recently, to people more progressed in their MS or having difficulties with any symptoms, that we have telephone-based telelink groups. We also have face-to-face peer support groups that we can link you with, and one-on-one telephone matching. So, for example, you might have somebody who's thinking about starting a new drug, Ocrevus, and that we might link you up with somebody who has been on that drug for a while, and that can give them some feedback and support around those that new transition. It's a good opportunity to chat to people who are in a similar situation to you. So if you are interested in a peer support referral, just phone call to MS Connect, or if you're interested in finding out how peer support can help you, please get in contact with MS Connect. As I said, we've got some upcoming programs, and you can find out what we've got happening if you call MS Connect or just on our website. We'd be happy for you to be, filling your brain with as much information and education as possible to increase your well-being. So thank you very much for coming on board today and sharing your afternoon with us, and maybe, or hopefully, learning a little bit more about how to best go about the access request form, and increasing your success in gaining access to the NDIS. Hopefully you're able to take that information with you and march into your GP and have a better understanding of how to fill out the form with some good results. So at the end of this session, once I close it, a poll or a survey will commence, and we'd really welcome your feedback on this one, because it's the first access request form education session that we've run, and Robyn and I would like to know if we can improve or if we've done a great job. So please feel free to share your comments with us. So thank you everybody for sharing the afternoon with us, and we'll catch you the next time. Bye.